All right, well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today titled Strategic Considerations and Changes for Section 45L Tax Credits. My name is Taylor Short, and I'm a tax partner with Forbes Mazar located in our Houston office, and also the market industry leader for our construction and real estate practice here in Houston. Also with us from Forbes Mazar is Tricia Salazar. Tricia is a director in our tax specialty group and is one of the leaders in our cost segregation team. The purpose for today's webinar is to give everyone an in-depth look at how the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 changed the rules and benefits to taxpayers under Code Section 45L. Before the IRA introduced these changes, Forbes Mazar was very involved in the 45L space and had a significant number of clients where we performed the work necessary to test the completed single family and multifamily units for 45L certification. And this was a test-based process performed on the back end of the project lifecycle and used energy efficiency ratings that dated back to 2006. Now that energy ratings have been significantly changed to more stringent standards, and the process for certification needed for claiming the credit has moved to Energy Star inspection model, Forbes Mazars currently doesn't have the Energy Star expertise needed to consult with our clients on whether their projects qualify for the 45L credit. That being said, we partner with several large consulting firms around the country that are ahead of the curve on all of the changes to 45L and highly specialized in consulting with clients on the front end of projects in order to maximize the amount of 45L credits for their clients. One of those firms that many of our clients work closely with is ARCSIS. ARCSIS is a nationally recognized inspection and engineering consulting firm that specializes in 45L. And we're pleased to have Thomas Cochran with us today to walk us through the recent rule changes and to provide some insight into strategic considerations that our clients should make when planning their next project. Thomas is a Senior Vice President of Business Development and Marketing for ARCSIS. He began his career with ARCSIS as a consultant and inspector and has over 15 years of experience with the company in engineering, field operations, sales, and operational management. Thomas has a tremendous passion for helping home builders and developers to deliver high performance, high quality buildings while optimizing revenue, profit, and brand value. So at this point, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Thomas.
All right. Thank you, Taylor. And thanks everybody for joining us today. As Taylor mentioned, I'm with ARCSIS. For those of you not familiar, we are basically an organization focused on builder services that are third party. So we do engineering and energy modeling, including structural, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. And then on the back end, we tie those out with inspection services to make sure that the home is built as it was designed and therefore will perform that way. We happen to be the largest in the residential engineering and inspection firm, touching 1 out of every 7 new homes nationwide. With that said, and pertinent to this webinar, we currently touch just over all 40% of Energy Star certified homes. And so for us, we've got an intimate familiarity and experience in the certification process and getting those homes across the finish line for all of our builder clients. So with that said, we've got a really good webinar today. And I will tell you, it's kind of a combination of a couple of separate webinars that I've done historically, because so much has happened since the original Inflation Reduction Act, the timelines for some Energy Star versions, and then recently some changes related to the housing and urban development energy minimums, which I believe have a lot of overlay that's applicable in figuring out the strategy for 45L tax credits. So what we're going to cover at a high level, starting with the total value of Energy Star, then we're going to talk about a transition timeline for the required program updated version, some common or known challenges, and maybe some tips and tricks there. In that fourth section, we're going to talk about our overall strategic considerations. You're going to see how some of these items overlap with each other and may prevent some kind of constant change and headaches rather than just, pure adoption and tax credit maximization. And then talk about some next steps. So here you can see that and again, this number is more than a year old. If anything, I would say that it's actually gone, more dramatically in the other direction. But at the time of the Inflation Reduction Act, we did some quick analysis with a partner in the energy modeling software space, Ecotrope, to show that an estimate of 45L capture from the old method of calculation to be just about 500 million was going to year over year drop into that, 242 million for the home builders, or more than a 50% drop. We also saw that in certain states that this was going to be bigger and bigger. Since then, we have now seen that with the coming transition to the updated Energy Star version in order to qualify for the first level of tax credit, that this is dropping even further, over the next year. Because some of the cost analysis and exercises that have been completed are now showing that the updates to energy features and other things to execute on the program may, at first glance appear to outspend the tax credit value. So with that said, where I always like to start in these is understanding what the actual value of Energy Star is. And I know for this audience, it may be more on the financial and calculation side, but in my experience working with home builders, I know that it's a lot of moving pieces and it takes a lot of people coming together to actually execute on something like a certification program. I like to joke that, builders are kind of like working with, an octopus where there's 8 arms and every one of those arms has its own brain and they kind of do their own thing, have their own KPIs and metrics. And so to have that, then come together into the execution of a certification and tax credit means that we need to make sure that there is value distributed across, purchasing, construction, operations, executives, warranty, all of these groups. And so for us, the underlying value of a certified Energy Star or Zero Energy Ready home is one, maximizing ancillary revenue. Not only are there tax credits available in many of your local markets, there are a lot of utility incentives available. In fact, some of those are actually tied to the home being certified. So you can, execute the same path and collect additional dollars. Others might have more of a, a la carte type program where they're focused on things like electrification, things like, heat pump water heaters, ducts and conditioned space, all of those. But what I would tell you is that there's often opportunities that you could, that you could combine with the 45L tax credit. In addition, and I would say this is one of the more hidden values, and it doesn't show up in the cost analysis necessarily, but it should show up in, year over year customer satisfaction surveys. It should show up in some, costs and budgets potentially being lowered the next year, and that's an increase in construction quality. These certification programs require a certified third-party HERS rater to complete certain tests and inspections. And this does lead to a lot of interaction at the field, at the construction site level to say this home passes, this home fails, this needs to be corrected, which ends up producing a, more consistent quality performing home. And so over time, we see that showing up in a reduction in warranty costs, in a reduction in trade callbacks, in a reduction in, minimizing disruptions in the actual construction schedule. So that's huge. And it's tough to quantify, but it is a real cost savings when you boil down these programs. The next one, and this is another, what I consider a hidden cost in home building as it relates to these, is a lot of builders. And again, my experience is a lot of, medium-sized local builders to the big national builders. We happen to work with 19 of the top 20 builders in the nation. And what I see throughout various markets and divisions is there is a lot of disruption in both the design and construction process related to keeping up with codes, keeping up with program version updates. And so you're constantly seeing, these big, vast plan libraries that need to be updated, that need to have new details added. Purchasing has to go out to rebid because they're changing their wall systems and things like that. And so I look at the tax credit as an opportunity to get above code in some instances and minimize those disruptions, because again, they do come at a cost of both time and dollars that builders are constantly having to chase down. The next one, and we have a lot of experience training sales teams and helping develop marketing materials. These are a competitive advantage and differentiator when you can show that you're building a home above code and that you've went through a certification program. We all know that the Energy Star brand is one of the most recognized brands out there, especially as it relates to any sort of sustainability or energy efficiency. So being able to train our sales teams, train our builder sales teams on the unique features, the performance benefits, the utility cost savings, and then put those into marketing pieces in that sales office is a huge value. And then lastly, and this shows up more and more frequently, is value to our investors. As we know, with a lot of builder sustainability reporting, or maybe some commitments on the sustainability side to their funding sources, that investors are highly focused on the S in the ESG space. And so being able to show number of homes certified, the lowering of HERS score, the lowering of carbon consumption and decarbonization is becoming more and more valuable. And those all show up in participating in programs like Energy Star and Zero Energy Ready. So when we talk about the timeline for Energy Star, currently nationally we're looking at the Energy Star 3.1 version. But what we have here is in front of you that the Energy Star 3.2 is required nationally. Now, there are some states that you can see here that are going to have some uniqueness to them, especially California. But what's really important here to understand is that with the guidance being provided by the IRS rather than the EPA, one critical thing has changed, and that is the new program version 3.2 is required on January 1st, 2025 home acquisitions rather than permits. For any of you that have been in the home building space for any amount of time, when the EPA makes a version update, they typically do it on a date permitted by, so that you can get ahead of it. This one, because the tax credit language is driven by the IRS guidance, actually is written on an acquisition date basis. So as you can imagine, any builder that was trying to capture this tax credit and has homes under construction or just starting that has not explored Energy Star 3.2 is not going to be eligible come January 1, 2025. That doesn't mean that you can't build to the program. That doesn't mean that you can't get your home into the next version, but you will not be 45L tax credit eligible. So that's a really, really important distinction in comparison to what we've seen in years past.
Hey, Thomas, I've got a question
Yes,
for
sir.
you. So, we've been talking a lot about home builders. So what is the definition of a single family home under 45L? And are there any kind of nuances or non-traditional type of homes that can be included in that?
Absolutely, Taylor. So when you think of a single family home, we typically think about it as a detached home, right? But in reality, we look at it from the program standpoints, a lot of ways to how it's permitted, right? So when it comes to townhomes, when it comes to small, 3-plexes, 4-plexes, and things like that, those product types can all be certified under the 4 homes program. Now, there's also distinctions for manufactured housing. There's actually programs for manufactured housing, and those manufactured homes do have the same eligibility for a $2,500 tax credit when certified to the manufactured homes program. And then we talk about multifamily, and multifamily does have certain distinctions. It's easy when you start talking about, high rises and things like that. But when you're talking about low rise, we're typically thinking of something that's like a stacked flat in condos and things of that nature. They are also eligible for 45L tax credit. With that said, multifamily does also have, one major distinction, which is the dollar amounts do change for multifamily tax credits. So what you'll see on a multifamily home is that if they certify to Energy Star, they are eligible for a $500 tax credit per door. If they certified to DOE Zero Energy Ready Homes, they would be eligible for a $1,000 tax credit per door. And the only way that you could actually capture the, I guess, capped amount of the tax credit is if you were to follow prevailing wage laws. So that's what we are looking at on the multifamily side, is that they've got a wages requirement that you could be eligible for the full amount of the tax credit. If not, you've got a lowered amount per door to participate with that exact program.
Awesome. Thanks.
You got it. So now let's talk challenges, right? And most people know challenges just become opportunities if we can overcome these. And so when we look at Energy Star, when we look at DOE, when we look at 45L in general, here are some of the common challenges. The good news is I can tell you that when I first put this together, this was rampant across the conversations that I was seeing within home building. More and more, I'm seeing that these are starting to be overcome through properly aligning incentives for divisions and departments and things like that. So keep that in mind. But, originally, challenges in achieving Energy Star, there's corporate goals and then there's division autonomy. And a lot of builders operate with division autonomy in mind, right? Basically, we care about brand and quality, but we know the importance of having a division that understands that local market, understands that local trade base, understands that buying population, and can be nimble, flexible, and reactive to what they need to do in that market. Because there were some misalignment there, we would often see that corporate had an incentive to capture as many tax credits as possible and reduce their liabilities here, whereas the division only saw this as additional costs. And so being able to better marry those and potentially credit divisions or understand that there's a certain mandate to achieve, that's goes a long way towards overcoming this challenge. The next one was, who pays for it? We had seen instances where builders did local cost analysis, and then they did some regional or national cost analysis. One, you come up with different numbers depending on what third party or energy modeling expert you look to, and two, you start to again say, I manage a local profit and loss statement, and this is going to add to my construction budget, but I don't see the credit reflected in that. And so being able to better marry those two goes a long way. Being able to determine a budget and being able to say, maybe there's some corporate support financially for achieving these goes a long way. The next challenge, and this one is, I wouldn't say new, but somewhat new and absolutely getting more attention paid to it, is the understanding that, taking a tax credit does put you at risk for audit from the IRS. And so when you commit to program certifications rather than just an energy modeling analysis, there are a lot of pitfalls and tripping points in a certification program. So you can think of kind of high level things of, one, was my energy model done correctly? And am I truly set up to execute and build a certified home? Or you can even get a little more granular. Did the energy modeling analyst that I used have a certification? Does the third-party HERS rater that I'm using have a certification? Or you can get, to me, as granular as possible, which is I'm required as a builder to, because of this is voluntary participation, I'm required to follow all of the items on the checklist, and those have to be marked passing, in order for me to get to a certified home. If any one of those was not accurately inspected, tested, confirmed, I could have, a certified home and an Energy Star sticker that the IRS has questions on, and any one of those hundreds of items that have been verified could be an area that they come back and say this home is not eligible. So making sure you're using qualified certified experts here, making sure that you have proper training, and then making sure that the inspections are absolutely happening, to make sure that each and every address is certified is critical. Some additional challenges for us, and I mentioned it on the last slide, you do see a difference in local cost analysis, regional cost analysis, national cost analysis. You also see different firms who have different familiarities with certain modeling standards, certain wall systems or other products and things of that nature. And so you are looking at apples to orange comparisons and saying this is going to cost me more than the tax credit's worth. When I got a second opinion, it's actually going to be profitable. And when I got a third opinion, I'm more confused than ever, right? And so being able to look at this from an energy modeling standpoint and get consistency is critical for Energy Star. And especially when you look at new markets that may have never built an Energy Star certified home before, or have very few trade partners that are familiar with this. All of a sudden you get, an insulator where you say, well, if I just did this on, cost plus pricing, you're going to add 10% to your construction budget. But because I don't know the program, because I'm expecting that now your rater is going to fail me, I'm at 50, 60% more on my bid because I know that this is going to be inspected. I'm going to have to make more trips there, et cetera. And so really being familiar with what it takes to do this program is important. I know early on in the transition, we had an experience in Florida where somebody went to bid and they went to go bid insulation. They weren't asking for any more material. They simply said, Energy Star requires a grade 1 install of installation. And so that means I can't have a lot of voids, gaps, and compression. A third party is going to come out and pass fail it. And they were told that it was going to add $7,000 to $8,000 to their construction budget, only to do it right. Not, again, no more materials, no changes in wall systems and assemblies, just because it was now going to be marked grade 1 or not. And so if you accept that at face value, you all of a sudden say, I can't spend $7,000 on a $2,500 tax credit, when the reality is that should cost zero, if not maybe potentially save on your bid, because the insulator is going to have fewer callbacks and warranty tickets that they've got to address. So being able to really question what those cost increases is a huge advantage and helps overcome this challenge. The next one, and this one's more market specific, HVAC design and commissioning. The Energy Star version 3 really had an intense focus on HVAC installation and performance. And so being able to know that you have a qualified designer, that you meet the design criteria that Energy Star has, and aren't used to having your contractor just use a rule of thumb and say it's 400 square foot per ton, and that's it. Understanding that oversizing does cause humidity issues, does cause, an overuse of energy, all of those things, and really using an expert here is going to be a key to, successfully certifying your home for Energy Star. And then lastly, program requirements outside of energy features. I would say this is an area where costs are potentially underestimated and should be a part of the cost analysis exercise, which is, this isn't just energy features that you upgrade. We now have to understand, hey, there's some new framing requirements. Does that come with a cost? I have to add ventilation. That's absolutely going to add a cost if I'm already not using an acceptable ventilation strategy. I've got to have bath fans that are now 50 CFM or more tested. And so I might be upgrading to an 80 CFM fan to make sure that I'm always there. Those are to me, the devil in the details kind of areas that you've really got to be aware of as you commit to this program. With that said, all of those things in combination drive performance, drive quality, and drive customer experience. And so, far outweigh, in my opinion, what the typical cost of those small upgrades are. So now let's talk a little bit about, complying with this program and really what this means. So you can see here, I really like the graph on the right so that you can see how Energy Star and their commitment to always being 10% above code continues to trail down in the ZERH score. I'm going to spend a second here just because I don't know the audience extremely well and let you know the ZERH score, or the ERI, which is an energy rating index, is basically a scale of 0 to 100. It does go higher than 100 if you're very inefficient, but it's a scale of 0 to 100, with the idea being that a HERS 100, a home energy rating system 100, would be about the equivalent to a 2006 code built home. And a HERS 0 would be a net zero home. It means that it would be absolutely neutral. All the energy that it's using is being produced on site or regeneratively, and so it's using zero energy. Where we are today in codes, you can see here, is the 2021 code is estimated to be in the low 60s. I would, tend to say from our experience, it's a little bit lower. But with that said, Energy Star saw itself in a typical range of requiring a home to be built in the 55 to 65 range, which I would say is mostly accurate in most climate zones. Now, with the transition to Energy Star 3.2, that score drops about 10% to needing to be in a range of about 45 to 55. So that's critical. And where we're at in terms of efficiency and the cost of getting to those efficiencies, you're probably looking at, an estimate of, $50 per point to maybe a few $100s per point. As we know, it's tougher when you get into the lower scores, which again are better. Think of it like golf. The lower the score, the better, the tougher the return on investment is to get that next point, right? I can move a HERS 100 to a HERS 99 by spending $5 and putting some gasket around a door. When I start getting into a HERS 40 trying to find a 39, I might be spending a couple $100 because I have to actually upgrade a system or a feature or put on better windows and things like that. So one of the key changes is that score coming down about 10%. And the next one, and this is a big one, is the thermal envelope is now moved to the 2021 code backstop. These presentations can tend to get very technical. I'm not going to be talking about individual features and R values. I'm only going to tell you that for this one, this is actually a big change. And it's one of the more, I would say, painful changes in doing analysis, because now you're not just looking at meeting a score and saying, great, I can certify my home. We're actually looking at just the attic and wall systems foundation and saying, am I outperforming the 2021 code? Which can be a big challenge. Now, I'm gonna also tease you by saying that this comes back to us, and that this is where you're going to start to see some of the strategic, overlay and considerations here in a few slides. So keep that in mind. We've got thermal envelope moving to the 2021 code. The next change that we had was, and you all are likely aware of this, was that we have clarification that the home has to be certified. Point blank, period. So we know that it can no longer be done just through a computer simulation and energy modeling. We also know that early on there was a lot of confusion of I can build to the program. I don't actually have to have it certified. That is not the case. In order to claim this tax credit, the IRS has clarified in their guidance that the home has to be certified, which means as part of this certification process that a home builder has to be registered as an EPA Energy Star home builder. They have to design their homes, build their homes, have their homes inspected and tested to actually end up with that certification in their hand. So keep that in mind, that along that process, there are certain requirements. So what this means is it does take planning and strategy. It's not something you could turn on overnight. It's also not that difficult if you work with qualified, certified people. I will also stress again here that this is an area where making sure that you have HERS raters, energy modelers, et cetera, who are certified are going to be critical. Otherwise, you put those certifications at risk. Again, I just covered this. All this is telling us is that certified means certified. And then we've got a timeline for transition. The next one, and this change doesn't impact many. It absolutely impacts the Arizona market. If anybody's building there, it could impact California, and then there's a small markets where this may affect it. But sampling is no longer allowed. So as of January 1, 2025, there will not be an allowance of sampling. And what sampling meant is that in the old days of Energy Star, there was a method of random sampling protocol that said not every home had to be inspected and certified, and it could still be certified. It was part of a sampling process, and this would ensure that builders' costs were maintained, and that if we did run into an issue, we could go back into other homes to make sure that they're passing. This has been discontinued, disallowed, and so you will not see sampling anymore. So that's it, right? And for all of us, what that means is in the transition to Energy Star 3.2, I need to update my HERS score by an estimated 10 points. I need to hit the 2021 IECC thermal envelope backstop, which again, all that means is that my walls, attics, and foundations are outperforming the 2021 code. and that I'm not utilizing sampling, which again, at this point would be somewhat rare outside of the markets that I mentioned. Everything else stays the same. So one thing that we saw early on, and we still, still pops up, is a lot of builders saying, well, if I could commit to this program, I'm going to have to put all of my HVAC ducts in conditioned space. And I always like to clarify, while not required, may be likely, but it's not a part of the program. So you can build with ducts still in an unconditioned attic, and not worry about it, but you do have to achieve the performance targets and the thermal envelope requirements regardless of where your ducts are. It may be an area where you get the most bang for your buck, and so you're going to see that there's a reason to move in that direction, but it's not an actual program requirement.
Thomas.
So, yes,
I have
Trisha.
a question. It sounds like there's a lot going on in this. There's a lot going on in this process. So what stage of a project should somebody kind of reach out and get involved with a consulting firm like you?
Yeah, Trisha, I'm so glad you asked, because again, the old method of doing 45L, it was kind of, for a lot of builders, an afterthought. It was, let me give somebody my closing list. They'll run an energy simulation. They'll tell me what homes met the 50%, heating and cooling savings, and then I'll get those tax credits. And a lot of builders did it that way. This was kind of a year-end bonus. Hey, let's see how many tax credits we qualified for. With the Inflation Reduction Act tying 45L to Energy Star and DOE Zero Energy Ready, you don't have the opportunity to wait. You actually have to do your planning pre-construction. I mentioned it earlier, but just making sure that you're working with certified people is critical. These programs do have design requirements as it relates to HVAC systems, et cetera. You have to build an energy model before you ever get out to construction. And I even tell people, one of the things that I look at is, if you've got a wall up on a home, it's likely too late to participate on that home. So a lot of planning and analysis needs to happen before we ever get to construction, Trisha.
Awesome. Thank you.
Of course. So I teased this earlier. This is a more recent update, which is that recently the USDA and HUD have updated their energy minimums nationally. So why does this matter? Well, a few slides ago, I told you that one of the big hurdles for Energy Star 3.2 was that you had to meet the 2021 thermal envelope minimums. Well, as of this HUD publication, they have now adopted the 2021 IECC as their energy minimum when using a HUD or USDA financing. So as we all know here, the HUD program is the FHA loan program, which means that for some builders, over 40 and even over 50% of their closings are FHA loans. And so what this means is now we have alignment where, instead of saying, you know what, my local market has only adopted the 2012 code, so to jump all the way to 2021 is going to cost me X thousands of dollars. We're now looking at it from a different perspective and saying, I've got to meet the 2021 code anyway, because I need to be able to make those sales to FHA qualified buyers. So with that said, the gap has narrowed in a big way, and I may be only worried about a few HERS points now. So the cost of compliance with the tax credit has been flipped on its head a little bit. So with this notice, what you're going to see is 2021 IECC is the minimum required for FHA programs. Minimum is a key word here. That also means that Energy Star 3.2 qualifies as meeting or exceeding this requirement. That also means that DOE Zero Energy Ready version 2 qualifies as meeting this requirement. And it also means that future code years meet this requirement. So for builders, as they're doing this type of analysis, they may come to find that the 2024 IECC is more advantageous than the 2021. So all of these energy codes, are meant to be on a path of increasing efficiency. The 2024 code is a really good example of, an area that a builder could look at and say, I know it's a more stringent code, but it actually offers me a little more flexibility. And so that's something that we tend to consult on, is what are the most cost-effective pathways to comply with all of your goals, all of the certification goals, but also all of the goals of things like this HUD update. So based on this, the enforcement date is 18 months after notification. So for everybody to understand that, that will be November of next year. November 2025 permits have to meet or exceed the 2021 International Energy Code in order to qualify for an FHA loan. So it's an extremely big deal, but it does in some ways kind of nationalize building code, which hasn't really been done before. And also in some ways it narrows the gaps in markets where they may have had, older, outdated codes. So for us, how we kind of look at it is the potential impact on housing. If you're a production builder, your mentality is that you may not know the exact program your buyer qualifies for. So you need FHA buyers included in your mix. That also means that all of your plans and homes would need to be updated to that amount, especially with the amount of spec building that's currently happening in home building. It's critical to meet this minimum so that FHA buyers are eligible for those homes that are, quick move-ins and things like that. This can and will have a negative impact on housing affordability. And the reason that one's important to mention is, not to just blindly go into this as, great, more energy efficient homes. The reality is updating to that code is going to cost, potentially thousands of dollars, and that will show up in the price of homes, right? The FHA and USDA see this as it helps affordability on the back end by reducing utility costs, but not necessarily on the front end, as it's going to drive prices a bit higher because construction budgets are going to increase. So it could have kind of an immediate negative impact and then a lasting, savings. Personal opinion on that one is that affordability is a bigger issue, and getting people into homes, I would think, is more important. So I see a little bit of misalignment there. Homeowners will see reduced operating costs, but again, they're going to struggle to realize those savings if they can never get in the home. So that's an important aspect of this. But the big one, and kind of what we see is that, advantageous overlay is this narrows the gap to 45L tax credits via Energy Star and Zero Energy Ready, because now you're already building a 2021 code built home. And that eats up, in some cases, 30, 40, 70% of the cost that you were estimating. So that's a really important piece in this. And then you still want to look at the, additional risk and liability. You may have poor code enforcement at a local level. You may have people not as experienced with the 2021 code. And then you put yourself at risk because you're, qualifying, a buyer's qualifying for an FHA that says it's going to be 2021 minimum. Yet when they go back and look at it, they're going to, find details and find items that don't necessarily meet that, putting the builder at risk, for using a mortgage program incorrectly. Again, I'm going to fly through this because this is just a technical slide, but I just want to tell you how big the jump is. It's estimated that the federal minimums in moving from 2009 to 2021 are a jump in 34.3% increase in energy efficiency. That's huge, right? That's what the previous backstop was. 2009 code adopted in 2015, and now we're going to be 34% more efficient with this move to 2021. The next bullet point is highly contentious. We have heard people tell us that it's going to cost up to $17,000 to make this update. We put a range of kind of on the low end about $2.5K, in some cases to about $12K to update. We have a lot of experience in energy modeling analysis and kind of the most cost-effective way to comply. We do see a lot of builders being able to do this on the low end in a lot of the more major markets. There are some specifically in kind of the southeastern United States where it may be a bigger jump just because of the current codes that are adopted. But I think there is opportunity here to meet the minimums on the lower end of this cost side. And then again, tips and tricks, pay attention to the 2024 code. That will meet the energy minimum requirements of HUD, and it's offering builders a bit more flexibility than 2021. With all of that said, it may also be worth your time to not what what a recent exercise showed us was a builder in the Western U.S. probably spent about $25,000 to $3,000 to get to Energy Star 3.2. So they overspent the tax credit value, by about $500 if you just take, kind of sticker value. Then what they found is, well, if I actually go for tier 2, which is going to be doing zero energy ready, that now makes me eligible for a $5,000 tax credit. And I only had about an additional $500 spend, right? So where tier 1 didn't make sense, tier 2 actually did make sense, where they said, I'm not necessarily comfortable spending $3,000 to get $2,500 back in a tax credit. But if I spend, roughly $3,500 to get $5,000, now it starts to make sense. So keep that in mind, that these tiers do allow for a little bit of a different approach and consideration. When I talk about tier 2, that is the DOE's Zero Energy Ready Homes program. But at a glance, what that actually looks like is you still have to meet Energy Star version 3.2. So that is your baseline. You also are going to now participate in the EPA's Indoor Air Plus program. You're going to have a new ERI Energy Rating Index, or HERS score, that's going to be slightly lower, probably putting you in the low 40s there. You do, in this program, have to have your HVAC equipment and ducts in conditioned space, which frankly you probably are already if you're hitting those types of scores. There's some water heating and fixture requirements in your plumbing design. There are requirements related to being solar ready. This doesn't mean that you have to install solar. It just means that you've got to have space in your circuit box. You have to have a conduit to run some wire, and you have to have a place located to actually put an inverter on the home. Pretty low cost, but making sure that you're solar ready, and then a few lighting and appliance requirements. But keep that in mind, is that a lot of times at first pass, especially before the 2021 HUD update, we've saw builders saying Energy Star doesn't make sense, but it may make sense to jump all the way to tier 2 and capture that $5,000 tax credit. So just a quick, what we see kind of as our roadmap to success as it relates to capturing the tax credit. The first thing to do is analysis. Look at where you are today, take your baseline home, and look at multiple scenarios, what we call scenario modeling, of different pieces of this. What is it going to take for me to just be 2021 code and meet HUD? What will it take to be Energy Star 3.2? What will it take to be zero energy ready? And then make sure that you've got all of those key scenarios and differences between them priced correctly. Again, don't just take it at face value. Make sure we're working with a trade base that is motivated to build this type of home. Make sure that we're asking the tough questions of, why does this small change equal $3,000? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But complete a very thorough gap analysis. Again, I always recommend having multiple scenarios. There are multiple creative pathways to get to compliance in these programs. That's going to allow you to do the most flexible pricing and see where that comes back to you. The next one is what I call a division preparedness review. This is meeting with the division representatives. So this is, from the division president on down to your VPs and directors of purchasing, construction, operations, et cetera, and really working through the program to say, guys, this isn't just, changing a water heater and our windows. We have to build this inspection process into our construction schedule. We need to have a protocol for when failures happen in the field. We need to make sure that we're contracted correctly with our trades because their scopes of work are changing. This may sound like a heavy lift. I tend to find that, time spent in this section really sets you up for success even beyond these certification programs. You get a fresh look at scopes of work. You get a fresh look at your plans, your scheduling processes, your attention to quality in the field. So making sure that you're meeting with the division and really understanding the programs you're committing to. And then third is basically an extension of step 2. It's now going directly to the trades so that you can say, one, we've hired a third party. They're likely going to be your expert on site. They can help you with training. They can help you with various resources. You're going to want to review program requirements and updated scope of work. I would tell you that the 4 key ones that jump to mind, although there are more, but you really need to spend time with your framer, your air conditioning, insulation, and drywaller. You have to go over what the inspection process is, what inspection reporting is going to be there, expectations, and failure protocols. Those are going to be critical. Otherwise, what you tend to find is somebody bypass something. The big one in this program, another tip and trick for everybody is that this program requires that a home has its insulation inspected. If that is not a critical milestone in the construction schedule and a HERS rater like ourselves shows up and the home is drywalled, that home cannot be certified anymore. There's no other method of verification. So if for some reason your drywaller wasn't aware that the home has to be inspected and they proceed, or they say, you know what, a different home canceled, I'm going to jump over there and sheetrock that, well, that could cost you the entire tax credit. So again, making sure that we're conversating with all the trades, making sure that we have processes in place to prevent those kind of common occurrences is critical. But those 3 steps, doing an energy model analysis, meeting with your division representations, and then extending that out into key trades are critical steps in delivering that. And a few more strategic considerations. Not all markets are created equal. With the HUD update, it does normalize more markets in the near future, but you will still see that there are markets throughout the U.S. that may have less experienced HVAC techs related to this program. You may see builders that have poor enforced code in some of their markets, and so they're having a hard time, really understanding the commitment to above code programs. So I always like to start, especially if you've got a builder that's operating in multiple markets, prioritize kind of those low hanging fruit markets and see what it takes. I also think it's a good idea to pilot some of these certification programs so we can understand the inspection process, the modeling process, the end certification process. I'll also tell you in that second bullet point that, like a doctor, getting a second opinion here is pretty important. A lot of times it's, quick cost analysis. It doesn't make sense. There can be many reasons for that. Sometimes, again, it's that misalignment at division incentives, or even, purchasing sees it one way, operation sees it another way. Getting a second opinion on the total cost of certification is critical, and I think it would serve a lot of builders well. And then the last one, there's already movement, related to things like the all-electric home, decarbonization, et cetera. Does this help put us above code enough where we're able to take advantage of that from a sustainability reporting and investment side? And if so, does it also prevent headaches in trying to keep up with the latest code, keep up with the latest version of program? And so we end up saving on kind of the soft costs of the business. I would also, again, recommend look at cycle times, because all of this is based on acquisition dates and permit dates. You want to make sure that we're addressing markets that have very long cycle times, because obviously they're going to take the longest to reach that compliance. You may want to consider a ducts and conditioned space strategy, because eventually it's coming, so you can reap some of the benefits now. There are some new windows entering the market. They do have a really good return as it relates to your home's wall and thermal envelope performance. So, just be aware of that. And then, consider HVAC grading. This is a test that third parties do that's actually worth some of these first points that I've been mentioning. And it's probably some of the most cost-effective and best ROI points out there. It also makes sure that when you turn over a home that the HVAC system is going to perform. So you get happier homeowners through something like that. And I know, so again, some of those points are technical. They may not be for our audience, but they may be for people that you're working with to understand those necessary steps. And with that said, I am done, Taylor. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Thomas. Well, and I did have one kind of follow-up question for you. So you had mentioned the potential for, IRS scrutiny on these credits with the amount, increasing, and, the standards increasing as well. What's kind of been your firm's experience recently with scrutiny from the IRS on these new credits?
Sure.
And if a client does, unfortunately get audited, what does working with a firm like you, how does that benefit them kind of on that back end if they were to get audited?
Yeah. So Taylor, well, thankfully we haven't experienced kind of a full audit. What we have seen is more address specific, or, we're looking at this certificate. what can you do to help me communicate with the IRS that this was done properly, right? And again, I think just based on volume, we're going to see more and more of that. So for us, where I think we provide a lot of value to our builders is we look at our processes as a way to very transparently communicate that the program was executed correctly. So when we get those types of requests for auditing a certain address, we will do things like provide our inspection reports, provide a history of who the certified inspector or modeler was on that project to give them comfort. But we even take additional steps to that, which are, not only are we just saying, yeah, we did it correctly, here's a piece of paper, we actually show them on our inspection reporting, here's site photography to prove we were there. It's geotagged and timestamped. So there's no, way that you're kind of fooling anybody to say that we got to a certification improperly. And so for us, I think taking those necessary steps is what's going to give builders comfort to say every home that I have a certificate for was done correctly, instead of, man, whenever I get these requests, it's always, kind of a wild card of what is my inspector going to give back to me to say that they did it properly.
Right. And I know we focused, the majority of this presentation on single family homes. And I think there's probably a reason for that, with the multifamily rules changing, what have been some of the struggles that you've seen multifamily developers kind of running into to even, to kind of get to a point where this is just a non-starter, for
Sure. What I will say is on the multifamily side, we tend to see the traditional multifamily side, we tend to see that their starting point is a bit behind from an energy efficiency standpoint in comparison to single family homes. So then when you combine that with still, the need to meet certain program requirements and a reduction in the tax credit value on that product type, it's extremely hard to make things pencil out there, right? So that's kind of our quick summary of multifamily, is that just their strategies have for a long time been kind of code required, and that's put them behind from a basic energy efficiency standpoint. And then with a reduction on what they can capture, it just can't pencil out. Now, with that said, I do also have, personal and we have professional experience where, because of some of the investor requirements on multifamily, they're looking for opportunities like this. So again, where it may not pencil out from a pure cost benefit standpoint to get the tax credit, they may say, well, it actually pencils out better than some of the other programs that we were allowed to certify to, because it comes with a tax credit. So it's still worth a look depending on the the requirements based on the financing of those projects.
Okay. All right. Well, good deal. Well, thank
Great.
you, Thomas, for all the information you provided. We have our information here on the last slide. So if anybody has any additional questions or wants to discuss more, feel free to reach out to any one of us.
Great. Thank you, Taylor. I appreciate you and your team having me.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.